Hi, everyone. This is Ray Phillips of Precision Driving Analytics. And there's a subject that I talk a lot about, and that's understeer and oversteer. And the reason why I talk a lot about it is because I found that that subject matter can really help my clients go faster. And the reason is that, when looking at setup and what a driver is doing and building confidence, it all kind of boils down to how much the car is understeering and oversteering. Um, some drivers like more understeer than others. So if you gave a pro driver a car that understeered a lot, he's probably not going to like that very much. He wants the back end to rotate a little bit more, because he's comfortable with that, and he knows that that's going to help him get to full throttle faster. And that's really what it boils down to. The driver's got to have enough confidence to get to full throttle as soon as possible, because that's what's going to give the best lap time. So I think there's a couple of different misconceptions about understeer and oversteer. One of them being that no car should have understeer, that a balanced car is a car that's 100% neutral, meaning really no slip angle. And I can tell you that I've never seen a car that doesn't have a little bit of understeer at the very least. And that's because if it didn't have a little bit, then when the driver's turning the steering wheel, the car's going to feel like it's going to rotate right off the bat, and that's not going to instill confidence in the driver. So it has to have a little bit. And when I calculate understeer, the main way I do it, there's several different ways, but the main way I do it is to calculate the theoretical amount of steering required to get a car around a corner. And that's taking into account the wheelbase of the car, lateral G's, and speed. So it's assuming that there's absolutely no slip angle, and you can come up with this theoretical steering trace yourself by driving very slow on a racetrack, and basically just driving the line at a very slow speed so that the car has no slip angle. Now, and I know there's people that have done that, but the problem is that that's very hard to do if there's other cars on track. So I end up using a formula that calculates the theoretical amount of steering required, again, based on the car's wheelbase, lateral G's, and speed. And then I compare the steering at the front tires, or the steered angle, to that theoretical amount of steering required. And if there's more steered angle than the theoretical amount of steering required, then that's understeer. And if there's less, then that's oversteer. So pretty simple, really. The other thing that I found is that it doesn't have to be 100% accurate, as long as you get to that reference point and you stay there. So in other words, if the car is showing, say 4 degrees of understeer, and the driver says the car is handling great, then keep that in mind. And if the car is got like 6 degrees of understeer, and the driver says that it's pushing like crazy, then try to get back to that 4 degrees. It's really all about that. Now, it depends on what the driver is doing and what the setup of the car is. So the question is the driver inducing the understeer, or is the car set up to a point where there's no way the driver can drive the car without having too much understeer. So anyway, I kind of want to dive into this even more, and I'm going to show you some examples of what I look at. The first one is pretty simple. I'm going to share my screen, and just about anybody with a data system with steering and lateral G's can do this. And so what this is a XY plot with lateral G's being on the X-axis and steering being on the Y-axis. And the way I like to look at this is I look at this the same way I look at a friction circle. So um, right-hand corners, the G forces are going to, right-hand corners, G forces are going to be on the left side. Left-hand corners, the G forces are going to be on the right side. So this side is left-hand corners and this side is right-hand corners. You can do it any way you want. That's just how I like to think of it. So what this is showing us, here's our zero line for lateral G's. So if I'm looking at this, I can see that, okay, steering increases up to this point, but lateral G's don't increase. So this is understeer right here, okay? And on this side, it's the other way around. So this is understeer right here. So you can see right-hand corners, the car has less understeer than left-hand corners because there's less steering input, right? So here, steering is getting up to about, maybe 80, 90 degrees, something like that. And over here, it's only, say, 70 degrees, okay? So if this is understeer and this is understeer, then any dots on this side would be oversteer, which there really isn't any there, but there's big oversteer moments here. So what this means is that, the car is going into a left-hand turn, and left-hand turn means that steering is going to be positive, because I see that in the y-axis here. So if the driver's making a big correction, then that steering goes to the other direction. So in this case, it's going negative. Okay. So that's a real simple way of seeing, if the car has understeer or oversteer on a given lap. This is one lap. Depending on your data system, you can probably have a bunch of laps. Okay. So now the question is, okay, what do you do with that? Well, you kind of need to have a little bit of history. I know these cars pretty well. This is a Ferrari Challenge car, and you've probably heard me talk about these before. And I can tell that this is a pretty decently handling car, with the exception of this oversteer moment here. This amount of understeer is not too bad. I've seen understeer go all the way up, to here. And in any case, if I looked at this just based on my experience with these cars, I'm pretty much good with it. Now, I will tell you that this data was taken at Road America. Here's the track map here. And if we click on where this oversteer is, that's turn 5, okay? And the thing is that this track was drying, so you can't really see much wet spots in the video, but there's still some damp spots on the track. So this oversteer moment could have been caused by that. So now I'm going to pull up some video. I'm going to share my screen again, and I am going to look at circuit tools, because that is from the VBox software. And I spent a lot of time getting this calculation here, the understeer oversteer. I've probably spent over a year perfecting this, and would I call it 100% perfect? No, but it's pretty dang close now, and not so easy to do in this software. It's much easier to do a lot of these calculations in other software. It's great that VBox or RaceLogic has this ability, but it could be a little bit better. But I'm happy that I've gotten it to work as good as I have. So yes, the way I do it is with math channels, and there is that function in the scenes. So just keep that in mind if you want to do something similar. So let's look at turn 1 real quick. So I'm looking at the driver's throttle. He's just coming off the brakes, and he's starting to apply throttle, and I see this lift here. Okay. So what that tells me a lot of times is that the driver felt like he had to lift because the car was understeering too much. So if I come in, zoom in on this a little bit more and just move the cursor, you can see, okay, now the car has gotten up to 3.1 degrees of understeer. Again, I'm looking right here. And now the driver lifts off the gas, and you can see the understeers are already decreased because of it. Now he's trying to make up for that lift, and he puts more steering into it, and more understeer develops. So he gets up to 4.3 degrees of understeer. Now let's look at the speed here as he's coming through. So at this point, he's up to 87 miles an hour. Okay, this is before the lift. And then as I'm trying to move the cursor there. So that lift has caused him to lose 1 mile an hour. Okay. So here's where looking at this understeer and oversteer comes into play, because if the driver has to lift off the gas, then that's no good. So he's lost time, as can be seen by losing 1 mile an hour. Okay. So what could the driver have done differently? Well, he could have been a little bit smoother with throttle application and tried to connect basically, this point to full throttle up here. If he could have done that, he probably wouldn't have lost that 1 mile an hour, right? Did he lose a lot of time? Probably not. But everything counts, right? So if I saw a pattern of this, like every time the driver goes into this particular corner, he has to lift, then, that would be one thing that I would talk to him about and see, if I can get him to be a little bit smoother with throttle application. If the driver says, hey, no matter what I do, this car understeers too much, then, then it's probably time for a setup change. So that's why this stuff is important. I can tell you 4 degrees is not too bad. I've seen as much as like 10 degrees. And if I'm seeing basically anything over 6, I know that that's a lot, but in any case, so he lost that 1 mile an hour, and then he gets up to speed, kind of deals with it, the understeer, and then starts opening up his hands. And you can see when he starts opening up his hands, letting the car come out, the understeer goes away. As he puts a little bit more in, more steering in, well, a little bit more understeer comes back. But that little bit of understeer isn't affecting anything because he's still staying full throttle. And that's really what it boils down to, is making sure the driver stays at full throttle. So let's look at turn 5, where we saw that big oversteer movement. So as we come down into turn 5, he's on the brakes. He's turning the car in now. Okay. And you can see the understeer is developing, nothing really at corner entry. And that's the other thing that you can get out of this, especially on the video, is identifying whether or not the understeer or oversteer is happening at corner entry, mid corner, or corner exit. Why is that important? Because that helps decide, or the engineers or whoever decide on what setup change to make, or what the driver needs to do differently. So if it's happening at corner entry, then you got to decide what to change. So you might change something in the front of the car because that's where the weight is. If it's at mid corner to corner exit, then my first choice would be to change something at the rear of the car, because that's where the weight is. Again, the driver has started to apply throttle. He's transferred that load to the rear of the car. So any kind of change in the back is going to make a bigger difference. That's what I found anyway. So, and that's not always the rule, but it's something to start out with. So now let's look to see when that oversteer happens. So I'm just stepping through, and here it is. So, as the driver comes through, there's a big oversteer moment. Okay. Again, this track was drying, so if you look at the throttle, he got the full throttle basically about here, pretty close to it anyway. But then has to lift because he needs to catch the back end of the car. He needs to transfer that weight to the rear. Well, if he lifts, he's transferring it to the front, but he's got to slow the car down too. And he's got to, correct for it. So, throttle induced oversteer is the easiest to correct. So basically, if you lift off the gas, stop the rear wheels from spinning, give yourself the time to catch it, then that can be caught, for the most part. Obviously, there's circumstances where that doesn't happen. But, he could have hit a wet patch here as he's coming through the corner, just something a little bit damp. But you can see he got up to a big amount of oversteer. That's a big correction. And, the back end of the car is rotating at this point, So, but he does catch it, and he starts, coming out of the corner. Car's now rotated thanks to that big correction. So now he can pretty much go to full throttle and accelerate out. And the understeer is gone at that point. He's basically doesn't have very much steering input. So, he's just turning the car left and heading up towards turn 6. So now let's look at turn 6, because there's also an oversteer moment there. So if I'm looking at turn 6, as he's turning in, I can see that there's an oversteer moment right here. So that would be corner entry oversteer, whereas the other one at turn 5, the other oversteer moment, I would call more mid corner to corner exit oversteer. So this is, again, corner entry, which does not give the driver a lot of confidence if he's trying to turn into the corner and the back end is stepping out. Again, this could have happened because there's dampness on the track there. But nevertheless, you can see how it shows up on the video. And as he's coming out of the corner, you see he's just coming off the brakes. Okay. So you'll see there's a little bit of coast period. That's the pink bar that pops up. See if I can get it to stop there. There. So you can see at this point, he's not on throttle or brake. Again, another math channel that I created. And the car is still in an oversteer moment, but he pretty much has it under control at this point. So now he can start applying throttle, and you can see he got up to about 3 degrees of understeer before there's a brief 4.2. So the car's still moving around underneath him. And then he's able to, open his hands and come out of the corner. So I think you can pretty easily see, the value of seeing this on the video. There's a lot of other ways of looking at this. I'm going to show you another video where, again, using VBox and circuit tools, where a car has a lot of understeer, and I'm going to show you why here in a second. Okay, so here's another car, again, at Road America. This is a Porsche 991.1 Cup car. Again, at Road America. And this car had quite a bit of understeer. And there's a couple of reasons why. I think one, the car setup, tends to give the car understeer, but the driver is also inducing some of that understeer. And here's the understeer heat box along with the values. So as this driver, I believe, is going into turn 8. Yep. So as he turns in, he's got just under 3 degrees of steering, or of understeer at that point. But as I move it closer, and you can see now he's up to 4.9, which is a lot, not absolutely terrible, He's just come off the brakes and he's just starting to apply throttle. As he's getting to the apex of the corner, watch how much steering input he starts to give it. So he's now at 5.7, and he continues to put more steering input in. So, he got it up to 6.2 degrees. He's still applying throttle. So what that's telling me is that this particular driver is inducing some of this understeer. The front tires aren't ready for him to be giving it that much throttle, and he needs to be opening his hands in order to take some of that understeer away. So again, it's great to be able to see this on the video. So as he opens his hands, what do you know? The understeer goes away, and he probably could have used more track out too. So that's kind of just a bad habit that this particular driver has. You don't want to be inducing so much understeer that it's causing your front tires to overheat, and you're basically just pushing through the corner. Once you feel that understeer, you need to be able to start opening your hands or getting out of the throttle, or doing something to get those front tires to have grip again. During a race, if he continued to do this, a 45-minute race or so, his tires are probably going to be quite a bit hotter than his rear tires. And his throttle application isn't bad. It's not like he's lifting. He just needed to wait a little bit longer before going to throttle, to counteract this. Ideally, though, I think the car could use a setup change, and I would probably again change something in the rear, because this is happening basically from mid corner out, after he started applying throttle. And to be honest, we did make a couple of setup changes and the car was better. So anyway, that's one good example of being able to see that the driver is inducing the understeer. So I'm going to show you a couple of other ways I look at understeer as well. I'm going to go back to the Ferrari Challenge car and take a look at some WinTax data. Okay, so what we're looking at is that same lap that we looked at before in WinTax. And this is what I call my lap compare profile. I use this to, compare laps and see where, the delta time is, that type of thing. So it's got all the basics, got RPM in red up here, speed in kind of a pink color, steering in yellow, throttle in green, brake in red. I've added the understeer, oversteer in kind of a beige color, and then gearing at the bottom. But the other thing that I've added is these flags that are in pink, overlaid on top of the throttle trace. And what those are is it's a math channel that's looking at throttle velocity. So if throttle velocity is negative, and if understeer is greater than 3 degrees, then give me a 1, and that shows up as this flag. And the 3 degrees is an arbitrary number, just based on my experience. That seems to be a good threshold to look at. So every time the driver lifts, which you can see, there's this one here, turn 1, and there's even this slight one here at turn 1. Gives me that flag. So it helps me kind of understand how much the understeer is affecting the driver's ability to get to full throttle and stay there. This really isn't all that bad. I've certainly seen a lot worse. But it's something to keep in mind. Maybe the driver can smooth some of these out a little bit more so that these flags don't show up. One interesting thing is in the carousel, it's common to see the drivers, apply and release throttle going through there. And they're kind of steering the car with that throttle pedal. And you can see the steering wheel isn't changing much. and neither is the amount of understeer. So even though there's quite a bit of movement in the throttle application, the car really isn't changing a whole lot. The understeer is staying about the same, the steering is staying about the same, and these little lifts and applications are basically just keeping the car as close to the inside as possible. But also notice that this driver isn't lifting all the way off. He gets close to it here, but he's making a concerted effort to make sure that some throttle stays in the car, because that controls the differential of the car. Any case, there's a number of other ways I look at understeer. So that's one way. I showed you the lateral G's versus steering. So we're going to go a little bit deeper here. So I've got this understeer versus grip levels profile as well. And what I've done is I've broken the friction circle up into pieces. And so here's braking, here's trail braking, here's cornering, here's traction coming off non-aero corners, and these are aero corners. So I can quickly look at this and see how much understeer and oversteer the car has, which has been very helpful in deciding on setup changes. So under braking, you can see the car's got a little bit of oversteer. Again, oversteer is negative, understeer is positive, and that's simply the car doing a little wiggle as it brakes, and that's pretty common. And the oversteer is not getting into an extreme area, so that's not an issue. So trail braking, this is probably turn 6, where we saw that oversteer condition right at corner entry there. This could be turn 5, the big oversteer condition here, and this could be turn 5 as well, because this is now traction coming off the corner. I can click on this and figure out where it is. That is turn 5, and I'm looking at the map up here, and that's also turn 5. And really no oversteer in the aero areas, which is good. So we're only getting up to just over 4 degrees in aero. So that's about what I like to see, to be honest, because you need some comfort in those high speed areas. So this is a quick way of looking at everything as well. If you want to put values on these graphs, and you can do that as well. So I'm going to find my understeer tab. So you can see I got a number of things here. So this is that same lap, and I can see corner entry understeer max is 2.5, average is 1.1, mid corner 5.5, max 3, average corner exit 4.9, max 1, average. No low speed corners. I think my threshold is something like 50 miles an hour, maybe even 45. And even turn 5 at Road America is faster than that. So nothing's showing up there. Mid speed 5.5, average of 2.1, high speed 4.5, average of 0.9. So that's all pretty good, so I can kind of flip through laps. This is a faster lap, and he's got really about the same numbers, a little bit higher. And that's the other thing, is if it's higher, then that's not necessarily a bad thing. If the car is able to go faster, depending on if that understeer is, slowing the driver down. Keep in mind, you can make a setup change and the numbers will be the same, but the lap is faster. So that's still a win, right? It's all about getting that faster lap time. So that's another way to look at it. I've got a total here too, understeer max over an entire lap. So this one was 171.7, previous lap was 163.25. So you can see that understeer increased. I've got some other things over here, but I'm not going to go into all that. There is one other thing that I want to show you though, and that's histogram. So again, just another way to look at it. This is the percent of time that the car is spending at different levels of understeer and oversteer. So you got your percentages on the y-axis, you've got the understeer and oversteer on your x-axis. And if I look at the oversteer, here's our 0 mark about here. Very little time spent in oversteer, only like 1.2%. So that's not bad. And high levels of understeer, not really a lot of time either, so it's one thing to look at a max, but it's better to kind of look at how much time that car is spending at that max level. So we saw that our max was about 6% or so, but it's only spending 0.15% of the lap between 5.2 and 6%. So that's not bad at all. And then only 1.42% from 4.4 to 5.2. So again, I can kind of flip through laps and see what the differences are. So the scale kind of shifted, but the results are still about the same. Still not much time spent in the high levels of understeer or in any type of oversteer. So again, just another quick way of looking at it. So anyway, that's kind of everything about understeer and oversteer in a nutshell. If you happen to have a VBox HD2 unit, then I am creating that understeer and oversteer, those math channels to get those that heat box and all on the scene. If you're interested in doing that, that's $500, and I can add coasting and other things as well. Really, whatever you wanted to do, but within reason, of course. And if you're looking for any data video products, I sell those too. So I sell the VBox HD2 units, AIM products, Motec. Started selling the Sentinel products. Those are really cool. That's for streaming. So yeah, anything you want in that area. And please check out my website at precisiondrivinganalytics.com. And if you're interested in anything, ask any questions you want, you can email me at rphillips@drivinganalytics.com. Thanks. Bye.